this whole scandal needs to be discussed as frequently as possible. The mainstream media should be talking about their connection at every opportunity. Here we have CNN elaborating on this report from the New York Times.
Just moments ago saying he has not been briefed on what Jeffrey Epstein's accomplice, Ghislaine Maxwell, told Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche during those 2 days of discussions in which we're told she mentioned 100 names. It comes amid the release by the New York Times now of previously undisclosed images and descriptions of the interior of Epstein's Manhattan townhouse. And these are important details. It was a 21,000 square foot home, decorated, as the New York Times describes, in Epstein's eccentric style. There was a sculpture of a woman in a bridal dress clinging to a rope suspended from a ceiling, a taxidermied tiger lounging in Epstein's office, and the infamous massage parlor connected to Epstein's bedroom. The New York Times also shows photographs that Epstein displayed at his apartment of himself with some of the most prominent people in the world. Okay, and we're not using that word lightly. A photo from 2000 of Donald Trump with his then girlfriend Melania Knauss. Sure.
Pack it up, ladies and gentlemen. Send them all to prison. I don't want to hear anything more. Donald Trump imprisoned. Bill Gates imprisoned. Mohammed bin Salman imprisoned. Prince Andrew imprisoned. How the is Donald Trump going to come out and say that he was not friends with Jeffrey Epstein, that he did not have an intimate relationship with Jeffrey Epstein? And then boom, here's this evidence. Here's even more evidence that these guys were basically best friends. You don't put up pictures in your home of people that you are merely acquaintances with.
That's one person, Bill Clinton and Epstein and another.
Oh my dude, look at this. These are the kind of pictures you take when you go to a resort in the Dominican Republic and they just have you lay on the sand. Bill Clinton, he's got to go to prison. Donald Trump, he's got to go to prison. They are posing, looking each other directly in the eye. And you mean to tell me that these motherfuckers are not guilty?
Seen with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, that picture also there, just to name a few. Front Now Steve Eater, investigative reporter for the New York Times, who obtained these photographs. And Steve, it's incredible reporting. I mean, the famous people that Epstein had on display came from vastly different worlds, right? There was politics, entertainment, tech. I mentioned a few, but really only a few, because I know that there were others. When we talk about some of the most important people in the world that were photographed with him and shown in his apartment, who else?
Yeah, well, first off, thanks for having me here to talk about the piece. Yeah, it's a real collection, as you said, of powerful people, of business people, of people in entertainment. So you had, anyone from Steve Bannon to Mick Jagger to Elon Musk, a pope, mixed in there. I think, if you look at the photographs and think about this, it was,
wait, what the Fidel Castro?
Mixed in there. I think,
what is
if you
happening?
Look at the photographs and think about
what the fuck? Yo. What is this lineup? Mick Jagger, Elon Musk, Fidel Castro, and Pope John Paul II. How did Fidel Castro get a picture with Jeffrey fucking Epstein? Is Jeffrey Epstein even in the picture, or was he just a communist? What is happening? This whole saga is bizarro. It's bizarro. One of the propaganda points that the Trump administration likes to hammer home is that Jeffrey Epstein, he knew a lot of people. He was very tapped in. He had friends all over the globe. Not me, but we were friends for a little bit, but not me. Which doesn't make it any better, because it just adds to the scale of the pedophile sex trafficking ring.
This. It was, an attempt by Jeffrey Epstein to sort of show the degree of people that he could be acquaintances with, to be friendly with, and to have them in his life, and that he had that access.
Right, to show that access. Obviously, many of those pictures weren't taken actually in the townhouse itself, but they were displayed there, right? So the people would come through, would be awed by him and impressed by him. So those photos are there, and then, you've been through this actual massive townhouse in Manhattan. 40 rooms? And you've been in perhaps one of the most horrible ones, definitely one of the most horrible ones there, the massage room located in a suite of rooms connected to Epstein's bedroom. That massage room where Epstein was said to have assaulted some of his victims. And, look, in light of what we have now learned, that room, I'm sure you having been in there, is unfortunately very meaningful. What did you see?
Yeah, well, just to clarify, through the photographs, we were able to get a view into the home, not through a tour of the home of some sort. But just what we did see. So on that floor that you're referring to, this is part of a 21,000 square foot home, and what we learned through this is on the third floor, there was basically this like suite that included Epstein's bedroom, it included bathrooms, but there was also the massage room. We found through the photographs that there were multiple cameras that had been mounted in these adjoining rooms, not necessarily that we could tell in the massage room itself, but the massage room, there were paintings of naked women. For example, a silver ball and chain were among the kinds of things that we could see that were visible.
And just all of that to think what happened in that actual room. And 40-room townhouse. I mean, it's a mansion. He renovated it fully. He redecorated it. And what you have described in your report, Steve, is an eccentric style. What stood out to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think in a word, creepy. I mean, I think that there are things that you would look around.
I'm laughing because that is the most apt description of Jeffrey Epstein. Of course, this pedophile freak is going to have a freaky ass house. And I'm actually glad that Steve Eater is on CNN saying what you're supposed to be saying. Jeffrey Epstein was a vile, despicable human being. He was a freakazoid. He was a freakazoid sex pest whose residence reflected that. He was an icky, disgusting, reprehensible human being.
And you would see, like you mentioned at the top of this, the taxidermy tiger. For example, there was the sculpture of a woman wearing a bridal gown and clutching a rope in the central atrium of the home. Framed prosthetic eyeballs lining an entryway. Just sort of a general strangeness, creepiness, to the home, throughout. Leopard print chairs, for example, were among the things that we could detect and include.
If I went to someone's house and they had prosthetic eyeballs, I'm leaving and calling the fucking police. That is weird. That is a red flag, dude.
It's pretty incredible. I hope everyone will read it in full, look at the photos that you were able to obtain and share. So important in light of everything we're learning now. Steve, thank you so much. And of course, I will note none of the people that Steve and I were just talking about whose photographs were on display in Epstein's apartment, none of those individuals have been accused of wrongdoing in the Epstein case.
We're talking tonight about all that's transpired since the Trump administration tried to put a lid on the Jeffrey Epstein story nearly a month ago, and everything that's not being done to get more of the truth out there. For instance, the House subpoenas issued yesterday to former President Clinton, Hillary Clinton, former attorneys general in both Democratic and Republican administrations dating back to the George W. Bush presidency. But one name conspicuously not on that list, the man who years before he served in the first Trump administration was a prosecutor and reached a non-prosecution agreement with Epstein, which was controversial back then and even more so now. Details from CNN's Randy Kaye.
Oh my God. Why does Donald Trump consistently surround himself with people who protected this fucking guy? Pam Bondi refused to prosecute Jeffrey Epstein for sex crimes when she was the Attorney General of Florida, even though there was a credible case against him.
In 2006, the FBI began investigating Jeffrey Epstein's alleged activities with underage girls.
I've seen hundreds and hundreds of girls go through Jeffrey's swinging door.
Yet as the feds got closer, Epstein cut a sweetheart deal. Here at Epstein's Palm Beach home is where much of the alleged abuse took place, according to court documents.
This happened when Pam Bondi was Attorney General of Florida, by the way.
As far back as 2001, it's believed Epstein began luring underage girls here with the help of those who worked for him. Most of the girls ranged in age from 13 to 16 and came from disadvantaged homes. They'd never before seen the exclusive Palm Beach Island. Federal investigators had identified at least 36 girls and were still building their case when suddenly in 2007 came this non-prosecution agreement. It allowed Epstein to plead guilty to a lesser charge, just 2 prostitution charges in state court, and register as a sex offender. He would serve just 13 months in county jail. The deal also granted immunity to any potential co-conspirators. None of those people were identified. The deal shut down the FBI's investigation into additional victims and accomplices, and any chance of Epstein going to prison for life.
Nothing good, like if you're a wealthy and powerful person in the United States, nothing bad ever happens to you. This guy could have been locked up 20 fucking years ago, but instead the Republican government at the time, because this was Bush 2, mind you, decided not to do that. And they struck a fucking deal with this goblin, with this pedophile human sex trafficking orchestrator.
Indictment. There was multiple allegations of sex trafficking, and then all of a sudden it disappeared.
The deal was signed off on by then U.S. Attorney in Miami, Alexander Acosta, who in 2017 became labor secretary under the first Trump administration.
He's supposed to be protecting these victims, and he was protecting Jeffrey Epstein, a pedophile.
It's scary because this
every time there is a story that comes out about Jeffrey Epstein, it's linked back to Donald Trump. Invariably, every time there is some connection between these two. It is undeniable. It is undeniable at this point. Whether it's Alex Acosta, whether it's Ghislaine Maxwell, whether it's Pam Bondi, whether it's Donald Trump himself, whether it's John Casablancas, there's no spin that you can add to it.
a government that's supposed to protect us, but has done everything to protect, a pedophile.
At his confirmation hearing for Labor Secretary, Alexander Acosta tried to explain his decision not to prosecute Epstein federally.
A plea that guarantees that someone goes to jail, that guarantees that someone register generally, and that guarantees other outcomes is a good thing.
No, it's, oh my fucking God. If this is my lawyer, dog, I'm going to jail. How is it a good thing when the crime that he pled guilty to is not even comparable to the crime that he committed? At least 36 victims by this point. 36 underage victims. And Alex Acosta is sitting here like, we got this guy on 2 prostitution charges. He's like, that's a W, Your Honor. That's a W. Except it's not. Because guess what? Jeffrey Epstein continued to do pedophilia afterward, even though he should have been in jail. In jail.
Years later, in July 2019, Epstein was arrested on federal sex trafficking charges after federal prosecutors in New York concluded that they weren't bound by the terms of the earlier non-prosecution deal. Days later, Acosta resigned as labor secretary amid public outrage over his role in Epstein's controversial plea deal.
I do not think it is right and fair for this administration's labor department to have Epstein as the focus rather than the incredible economy that we have today.
Top Democrats in Congress had called for his removal following the new federal charges against Epstein for allegedly sex trafficking young girls. 2 days before he resigned, Acosta said he was pleased about the new federal charges against Epstein.
Epstein's actions absolutely deserve a stiffer sentence.
About a month later, in
oh my God, this guy's such a fucking loser. What a bum, dude. It deserves stiffer charges, except you couldn't bear to bring those stiff charges to him 13 years earlier, or 11 years earlier.
Epstein was found dead in his federal jail cell while awaiting trial. Randy Kay, CNN, Palm Beach County, Florida.
As I'm sure you guys know, this is a disaster for the Trump administration. This whole situation is an enormous headache for them. It is not something that they want to deal with. However, it is still a massive scandal. Arguably the biggest scandal in the history of the presidency, I would say. That you have a sitting president tied to the most prolific pedophile ever, who not only has ties with the president, but has ties with highly influential figures all over the globe. When you have situations like this, folks within the administration tend to have strategy meetings on how to handle these crises. They effectively are attempting to do PR for themselves. Reporting came out that J.D. Vance got together with Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, and one other person, I forget who it is, to discuss how to maneuver around this case. ABC News reported on this. ABC News is now reporting that J.D. Vance denies having had that meeting.
Vice President J.D. Vance is pushing back against reports he planned to host a strategy dinner on Jeffrey Epstein and the Epstein files. Sources say top administration officials planned to meet at the vice president's residence yesterday as they weigh whether to release the transcript of an interview with Epstein co-conspirator Ghislaine Maxwell. But
an interview wherein she conveniently said that she never witnessed Donald Trump do anything concerning in front of her. Why is that noteworthy? For two reasons. One, Ghislaine Maxwell has been moved from her original prison in Florida to a lower security facility in Texas. Number two, Donald Trump has on multiple occasions mentioned that he has the ability to pardon Ghislaine Maxwell.
Now, Vance says the dinner never happened and was never scheduled in the first place. Washington Bureau Managing Editor Catherine Falders has more on that. Catherine, what's the latest here?
Well, the bigger picture here is that, yes, there was a meeting scheduled yesterday. They always and have typically been meeting, whether it's at the White House or somewhere else, about the strategy as it relates to Epstein moving forward here. This is a issue that has really encompassed the White House, the Department of Justice, and the FBI, and something that they haven't really figured out the path forward on yet. And what I mean by that is there are debates internally about whether or not to release that transcript of that interview that Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche did with Ghislaine Maxwell earlier this month. Conversations have really revolved around that transcript, around an audio recording of that, how to release that, whether to release that or not, and then when to make that public. So these discussions that have been happening among top administration officials are still very much ongoing, Diane.
This really highlights the incompetence of the administration, that they weren't able to figure out how to handle this. I love it. I love the fact that Donald Trump is a fucking dumbass and he has managed to surround himself with lower IQ individuals than himself. I want this story to persist. I do not want this to go away. However, if there were a previous president who was involved in a scandal similar to this, on January 21st, he would have gathered everybody he could have and sat them down and said, we are not going to fucking say anything about this situation. Instead, you have Pam Bondi saying that the Epstein client list is on her desk and I'm looking at it right now. And then all of a sudden, it's gone. It never existed. But this was after she had given out binders to a bunch of MAGA influencers. You have Kash Patel going on Joe Rogan saying that he's got all the videotape and we're going to release the raw file. And then the raw file comes out and it turns out it's not a raw file. It's a screen recording of the raw file. And there's a minute missing at 11:59 p.m. when Jeffrey Epstein allegedly killed himself. Not only that, that video is spliced together and saved multiple times over. It's a fucking debacle. You have Donald Trump himself saying that he never knew Jeffrey Epstein. But he did know Jeffrey Epstein for a little bit, but then their friendship fizzled out because he did something really disgusting, and that was stealing an employee from him. This employee, Donald Trump couldn't remember their name, and then he remembered that it was in fact Virginia Giuffre, who was a masseuse, an underage masseuse at Mar-a-Lago.
And Catherine, now the vice president is pushing back on the idea of this strategy dinner and whatnot. Where does this whole story go from here? How's the administration handling this now?
Well, it's a good question. I don't think that they have decided themselves really where this is going or how this will end. There's lots of different voices weighing in on this internally. Everybody appears to have a different opinion, whether that's doing a press conference and answering questions from all sorts of reporters, whether that's going on in a controlled environment or in a specific interview for these top administration officials, whether it be the Deputy Attorney General or the Attorney General. What exactly to release from this transcript and whether to make it all public and release the audio recordings. So this is something that they're very much talking about behind the scenes. But I just note this is a problem that has been, frankly, created by them in some ways. The Attorney General, Pam Bondi, really started this back in February when she released those binders of the first phase, if you will, of the Epstein files. And now it's just continued and plagued the administration. So they're really, at least behind the scenes, trying to figure out a good path forward, especially as those top voices in Trump's MAGA base have expressed deep frustration over how this has been handled by the government.
Only some of them, mind you. And you have people like Charlie Kirk, who doesn't want to talk about Jeffrey Epstein anymore because Donald Trump said not to talk about it. The answer as to why this is such a debacle is because they can't release the Epstein files. The Trump administration can't release the Epstein files because Donald Trump is in there. Pam Bondi told him he was in there back in May. There has been thousands of redactions of Donald Trump's name in the Epstein files that the FBI was ordered to take out. 1,000 FBI agents combed the Epstein files and redacted Donald Trump's name. That's why they don't know what to do. That's why J.D. Vance has no idea how the fuck to to handle this. Same thing with Kash Patel and Dan Bongino and Pam Bondi. They really can't do anything. They can't do anything positive about this because it would further implicate the sitting president of the United States in a global pedophile sex trafficking ring. However, this administration has had a ton of help in laundering this scandal by way of Fox News and conservative media in general. As always, Fox News, Newsmax, they are premier Trump dick riders. The same people who are part of the kill your local pedophile crowd all of a sudden do not want to kill their local pedophile because he is the president of the United States and they love him. Greg Kelly said that Ghislaine Maxwell might actually be a victim. I have this article in front of me, courtesy of Media Matters, that says Fox has devoted over 7 times more coverage to Sydney Sweeney than the Epstein scandal recently. As you guys know, Sydney Sweeney starred in a eugenicist pro-Nazi ad from American Eagle. Sydney Sweeney has great genes. The copy of the ad highlights her blonde hair, her blue eyes, and attributes that as to why she's hot, and not just her being hot because she's hot. Of course, that is a noteworthy story because corporations, I don't believe, should be doing outrage marketing rooted in eugenics. But Fox News has taken this and ran story after story after story, while at the same time refusing to highlight all of these new uncoverings related to Jeffrey Epstein. Fox News has continued to obsess over an American Eagle ad featuring Sydney Sweeney talking about her quote-unquote good genes, spending 4 hours and 50 minutes discussing the ad since July 28th. By comparison, Fox has devoted just 40 minutes to covering continuing developments related to the fallout from the Trump administration's handling of the Epstein files. Fox has continued to highlight quote-unquote backlash against the ad campaign, citing social media users and Instagram comments on a post from Sweeney about her dog to anchor the network's continued coverage on the topic. After President Donald Trump weighed in on Sweeney and the ad, a surge of coverage followed on Fox, with hosts seemingly thrilled that the president has kept the story in the news. Internet calls Sydney Sweeney's dog a Nazi. That's a Nazi pet. Swastika Sweeney. Hyper white person pet for sure. German Shepherd, just like your salute to Hitler family. I will make this abundantly clear, guys. And I said this when I talked about the Sydney Sweeney ad. I don't think that Sydney Sweeney is a Nazi. I think that she was bag chasing. Coverage of the administration's handling of the ongoing Epstein story has remained much lower than coverage of Sweeney's ad, with Fox dedicating just 40 minutes of coverage since July 28th, despite a spat of new developments. When Fox did discuss the Epstein story, coverage frequently focused on a House panel subpoenaing the Clintons over their connections to the convicted sex offender. Fox's obsession with Sweeney has also overshadowed other arguably more pressing issues like rising grocery prices, to which Fox dedicated just a minute of coverage over the same period, even while polling shows a vast majority of Americans are concerned about the price of groceries. 53% find going to the grocery store as a source of stress for them right now. Week 2 of the Fox News obsession with the Sweeney ad campaign has continued to allow Fox to shift the coverage away from potentially damaging topics to Trump and his administration by continuing to feed their base culture war distractions. I think that there needs to be Nuremberg trials for the Epstein scandal, where the news anchors who perpetuate this propaganda are tried and sent to prison. It is so gross that they are running coverage for a global pedophile ring. Jesse Waters, Sean Hannity, Laura Ingraham, Greg Gutfeld, all of these people. Remember, this is the kill your local pedophile crowd. They want sex offenders to be publicly executed in Times Square. And then all of a sudden, Donald Trump is connected to the biggest sex trafficker of all time, and they're fucking silent. They're disgusting. They are spineless cowards who deserve punishment for aiding and abetting the cover-up of this scandal.